Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. I'm your host, Amanda, and my amazing co-host is...
Hello, I'm Megan.
Hey, hey. All right, so we are your source for messy, imperfect homeschooling advice and community. And we're not alone today. We do have a guest with us, which is super exciting, and we'll introduce her just momentarily because we have some epic fun planned for today.
I am kind of cracking up at your description of fun because if our audience was anyone other than homeschool parents and caregivers, they might be like, really? This is your idea of epic fun? But yeah, it is. It's going to be good. So we'll get to that soon. So hang tight.
Yeah. So beyond messy and, let's be honest, imperfect advice, the other vibe that you can expect here is totally secular and progressive values. If you have been trying to make homeschool friends or even just connections in the homeschool community, you have probably found yourself in one of those situations where you're thinking like, hey, this group, this might be my new place, or like the new person that you've met. You're like, yeah, this person really maybe has potential. And then they say something like, well, public schools are really just trying to turn everyone gay. Or, they let kids dress up like cats and use litter boxes in schools these days. And you're like, yeah, no, just no. Because look, nobody needs that these days. Nobody needs that in their life. So anyway, we're going to put it up front from the start who we are. We usually start every episode with a value statement affirming all of the different concepts like women's bodily autonomy rights or no human being is illegal. But right now we are recording just days after the Brown shooting. So today we're going to keep it simple and say that we demand common sense gun laws. Now, the end, full stop.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that was a big factor in my decision to homeschool from the start. We've talked about it before, but Sandy Hook for me was kind of the one. And I remember this woman on the news saying that she saw emergency vehicle after emergency vehicle flying down the road, lights and sirens. And she just kind of had this gut feeling like she knew it was the school. And so when my kids were in school for their very short stint in school, we lived within earshot of the school that my kids were at. And I'd be home folding laundry, cooking dinner, and I'd hear a siren and I would literally have this wave of panic. I would freeze. My heart would stop, like horror, and I'd sit there kind of frozen and wait to hear if there was another one. Because if it's just one, it's just random police stuff. But if it's multiple, something's really bad is happening. And so I'd kind of wait and then I'd go back to my regularly scheduled programming, whatever I was doing. And I realized I can't live like this anymore. I mean, this is ridiculous. I can't do this anymore. So yeah, it was a big motivating factor for us.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. We shouldn't be doing it anymore. And so listen, if you are listening and you're feeling sad and frustrated and overwhelmed and truly just all of the emotions, please know that you are not alone. We are unfortunately in that same boat with you. That said, today we are going to aim to provide some respite from the chaos of the world with hopefully a pretty awesome episode, if we do say so ourselves. Okay, so now typically we begin each episode with a weekly recap as part of our whole anti-influencer, keeping it real vibe. But today's episode is probably going to run long because we always run long when we do a coaching session. I'm not sure anyone has gotten exactly their 55-minute coaching session. So for today, we will keep it short. I'm going to take charge, provide a weekly recap for both of us and say, I am exhausted. I'm still sick. And December can just be done now. Thank you very much. And for Megan, she is also tired, though she's specifically tired of the rainy weather that they have been getting in Portugal. And if you listened last week, she was talking about she found funfetti cake. She has bought more and she is still absolutely rocking the funfetti cake.
Life is good. Except for the rain, life is good.
But it does encourage you to eat more funfetti cake. So that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So rightio, let's go ahead and jump into our amazing guest.
I know. I'm super excited. Okay. So our guest today is Devin, and this is her second appearance on the podcast. We've never had a multi-appearance guest before, Devin. This is huge. So welcome. We are so glad you're back.
Well, thanks for having me back. I love talking with you guys, so I'm like, I could come back. We could talk about more things because, well, one of the biggest things that has changed since we talked last is that I am now homeschooling because previously I have 4 daughters and they were all in public school here. And then last year I decided, with a lot of emotional support from Megan, I'm like, Megan, I don't know. What am I doing? But me and my husband, we decided to pull them out of public school. And so we've been homeschooling them since like April, Mayish of earlier this year. So yeah, I've been, on the side just like chatting with Megan because my daughter loves Megan. Speaking of funfetti, my daughter loves Megan's cake class. If you have a kid who loves cake at all, like send them Megan's way. Shameless plug because, oh my gosh, my daughter loves Megan's baking classes. Anyway, Megan can send you all the details on how to find it, but they're fabulous. But so I've been chatting with Megan because we're good friends. And I was like, gosh, I just feel like I have these questions about what I need to do for my girls, make sure I'm setting them up for success, make sure that I'm not leaving big gaps in their education. And she was like, you should come on the podcast. I was like, I would love to do that. So here we are.
Yeah, I'm so excited for your transition to homeschooling. It's super awesome. So today we thought we would have a bit of fun since Devin was coming on. You may or may not be aware, but Amanda and I offer homeschool coaching sessions. We each meet with prospective homeschoolers, caregivers, parents of homeschoolers, or existing homeschoolers at any stage in their journey and help them with whatever they need. And sometimes we both meet up with the same person in the same session. Sometimes people want a little bit of what Amanda does and a little bit of what I do. Other times parents want really specific help with curriculum. That's all Amanda. Do not do that thing. Sometimes they have this beautiful vision of what their unschooling journey is going to look like, and it goes completely off the rails and they need help with some course correcting. That's where I come in, among other things for each of us. But yeah, so we thought we'd do a bit of that today and have some fun.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so that's the thing. Every session is completely customized to the individual person's needs and what their kiddos and their family need. So before we meet with each person, we ask them to fill out a short form with some foundational info and their goals for the session. That way we can tailor the entire session to them. And it's not just a generalized, like, oh, well, you might like this. And so it is a huge difference from listening to the podcast where we speak in generalities and we touch on specific topics for an entire hour, but it doesn't really cover everything. So you might be listening to a podcast and you're like, yeah, I totally get it. I'm picking up what you're putting down. This is awesome. And then you go to implement whatever we were talking about and you're like, okay, like, wait, how was that all supposed to fit together? And like, what do I do when my kiddo says this, not that?
Yeah, applying it to your own situation can be quite different. I've talked about it in the past when I took a cake pop class, and in class, I was like the ultimate cake pop maker, and I left so confident. And then when I made my first batch by myself, it was a disaster. So yeah, it could be things like getting your kids or your spouse on board, factoring in your kids' quirks or their past history. Everything about your homeschool journey is unique. Your kids unique, your families are unique. So when we're talking about something in the podcast, it's kind of broad strokes. And when we talk about things in coaching, we really get down and dirty as far as your specifics. And really, when we're talking about something as important as your kids' education and their future, you and they deserve that level of specificity as opposed to just kind of general stock standard advice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so today we are going to try something new. We're going to try sharing a coaching session with you. Devin, as she mentioned, is pretty new to homeschooling. So she's still kind of figuring it all out as she goes, which look is super common. And anyone who's in their first few years and tells you they're not still figuring it out is probably lying to your face. Okay, so anyway, we asked Devin to fill out our coaching session prep form. And here we go. So thanks for jumping on board with this idea, Devin, and putting yourself out there.
I'm really excited to have your help and your expertise. It's going to be great.
It's going to be fun.
I'm excited.
All right. Our coaching session intake form asks for 3 goals for the session. Like if you could only walk away with accomplishing 3 things, what would they be? So we've got that from you, and we have the advantage of having seen that form. So we know who you're homeschooling. But for our audience, you mentioned that you have 4 daughters. So would you give us just a little background on who you're homeschooling?
Yeah. So I've got 4 girls. They are 12, 11, 8, and 6. that one of them just had a birthday. It's usually every other year, but the 11-year-old just had her birthday. So I was like, I can't do every other. Anyway. And so it's going really well. We decided to pull our girls out of school because I was just sick of the tears in the morning and the tears after school and like never having time as like a family to ever do anything. And so I've been loving it. Like I really am so happy with the homeschooling journey. The biggest thing that I'm so stressed about is my oldest daughter. She's in 7th grade now, technically. So she's getting ready to go into 8th grade and high school. And I just want to make sure I'm not missing any gaps, because here's something I didn't know until I started homeschooling. I had no idea what my kids knew. I literally had no idea what they knew, because like in our school district specifically, the elementary school didn't have any homework. So I had no clue what they were doing until I like went to parent teacher conferences and they're like, the kids are doing great. I'm like, okay. And then in the middle school age with my oldest, like she had power homeschool, but I didn't realize I had to check it. She didn't know I had to check it. So we started homeschooling and I sat down and I said, what do you know? And they're like, I don't know what I don't. They're kids. And I'm like, I don't know what you know either. So we kind of had to start with this diagnostic, but I feel like I'm still in that diagnosing kind of phase. So one of my biggest concerns, I feel like with my younger ones, we're doing great. We're reading, they're taking math classes, they're doing their usual stuff. I'm not stressed about them. But my oldest daughters, I really want to make sure that I'm setting them up for success going into these higher grades where it does kind of start to actually matter for their future.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And so, one more thing I'm just going to throw out there that you shared with us and kind of like your first goal with your 8th grader is that you did mention that she's also showing a lot of interest in science, physics, and
Yes.
biology. So, you've been using Khan Academy for that. Is that correct?
Yeah, what I've been doing for her for a lot of her curriculum is I showed her Khan Academy and I said, pick something. And one of the reasons I chose Khan Academy was from your recommendations. And it's free for anyone who doesn't know, which is great. When you have 4 daughters, things add up. And so I sat her down and I said, I want you to pick whatever you want to learn. And I want you to do 30 minutes in one subject, 30 minutes in another subject. And so we were doing some like cellular biology. And then she started doing physics. And she came to me with this existential crisis. She's like, Mom, movement is relative. And I was like, yeah. And she's like, but nothing is moving and we're all moving. And I was like, uh-huh. And she was like, but why? So it was really fun. So yes, she's been doing Khan Academy classes, a lot of those, and really showing interest in physics and science and all of that kind of STEM stuff, which I genuinely never thought that would be what she'd be interested in, which was also another really cool thing with homeschooling is we found something she loves.
Love that.
Yeah, no. So, okay, before we do anything else, just so that we're all on the same page, are there any specific needs or challenges or struggles that we would need to be aware of when we're talking about curriculum specific type things or executive function type stuff?
No, nothing specific in that way. Not that I can think of. My 8-year-old's a little bit behind in the English department, but we're working on that mostly with just reading. But otherwise, all my girls are ahead or on par with where they're supposed to be according to their age and whatever arbitrary standards are out there that means they're all
Yeah.
on par.
Perfect. It just helps make sure. Sometimes we do coaching sessions for at folks who have kids at different levels, whether they're super ahead or, they're never going to be at grade level, but I still want to be able to challenge them. What do you recommend? So just to make sure anyone who's listening and trying to follow along and see where they can fit things in their own life. So before we say anything else, you brought it up. We have recommended it before, but Khan Academy really can be a great resource. It is solidly standards aligned and it's free. So in my world, that's a double win. If your kiddo is enjoying it and doing well with it, stick with it. We often start our coaching sessions with that idea of like, if you have something that is working, don't change it just to change it. We can tweak things and stuff, but if something is working, it's going to stop working at some point. That's how human beings are. So ride that wave while it's working. One of my first thoughts is that for physics and biology specifically, you might look at Science Mom. Her courses are marketed as middle school classes. I would say they're pretty intense for a middle schooler and maybe considered kind of high school light, but could definitely cover lower level high school courses with some additional experiments if that's something that you're interested in. She has a free one. It's on earth sciences, I think, but you could watch a lesson or two and look at the notes and see if it's like a style that gets your kiddo excited. But it's one of those things, it's definitely really solid, and a lot of kids respond really well to their kind of fun, quirky videos and lecture style. So definitely worth keeping in mind. They have a very solid physics program that is really advanced for a middle schooler. So when I saw that she was interested in physics, I was like, oh, that's might be a little bit more fun than Khan Academy if she's getting into that. The other thing about physics for me that was kind of like the first thing of like, is, as I'm sure you know, physics is pretty math heavy. So I would just want to make sure that she has a really strong foundation in math. Khan can be great for that. And if it's working for her, that's great. One of the struggles that you sometimes have with Khan Academy is that it doesn't provide a lot of practice. So sometimes kids feel like they're doing really well with it, but then when they have to be able to take it and apply it somewhere else, they realize they didn't get quite enough practice to be really competent in the skills outside of the website or the app. So one of the kind of suggestions I would have would be to just double check on where she's at with math and how well she's going to be able to apply it when she starts working with those physics equations and things like that. A couple of my favorite math providers for middle school, that's definitely different than elementary. Some of my favorite elementary programs are not ones that I would ever recommend diving into at the middle school level. So at middle school, I'd maybe take a look at Mr. D's math, especially if you don't want to do the math teaching. If you feel super
Nope.
confident and you're like, I am here, I can totally rock this. Like, if you can totally rock it, Saxon might be a better fit because it's more like a traditional school curriculum, more brick and mortar feel. And so it's pretty easy for a parent that's interested in teaching it to use the Saxon curriculum. That's not me. I don't want to be teaching. And so there are other options for that. So Mr. D's, they do all of the teaching themselves if you go Mr. D's math route. And then kind of an in between that is really solid is Thinkwell. And that's because that's a curriculum you can get, you can use it yourself, you can do all of it at home. You can use Thinkwell specifically for their classes, but there are also a few other providers online that do courses using the Thinkwell curriculum. So it's a really solid curriculum and it's pretty easy to find flexibility if you need it and still use that curriculum. Um,
Well, and
so
I think it's nice to think about the precursor for physics is math, and that's like that
yeah,
curriculum building. And we love our math program. She's actually not using Khan Academy for math. She's taking some classes with mathletes on OutSchool, and it's
okay.
amazing. Like if any parents need a math person, Tara, she's the teacher there. And so it's a twice a week class because exactly like what you're saying, I was worried that if she were on just a self-paced async kind of do it yourself that she couldn't take those math skills outside of that environment like what you were saying with Khan Academy. So I think that's really good though for me to consider as she gets deeper into physics, like, okay, is your math keeping up or do we need to up your math before you're able to progress with physics? It's a really good point.
Yeah, and it's that thing. For some kiddos, a twice a week class is going to be enough. Some kiddos might pair a twice a week live class with Khan Academy or something like that. And some kiddos might need something that's more structured. So you're kind of doing work every day and practicing. And so there are a few options, right? Different things to look at. And I won't throw all of them at you because that would be completely counterproductive to an actual coaching session. So some specific options if you decide that you need to do a little bit more. The other thing, you didn't actually specifically say it initially, but you kind of mentioned worrying a little bit about English and the ELA component. And I'm just going to do a plug for Hearth and Stories ELA program. We've talked about it a little before. For the average learner, I think Hearth and Story is a fantastic ELA program because it's bite-sized pieces. It does a great job of review. It covers all kinds of things, but very rarely does it get overwhelming for most kiddos. And I think that's really important. And they have so many pieces in it. So there's, vocabulary and grammar and poetry and novel studies, but each piece is really like 5 to 10 minutes a day for the most part, and that's nice. Writing can definitely take longer because they work a lot on pretty quality, high level writing. But one of the nice things specifically for your kiddo is that they have a combined seventh and eighth grade unit. And it's because when they started putting it together and looking at what the kind of standards were, they found that what they wanted to teach and how they wanted to put it together covered the standards for seventh and eighth grade. So some people take it and they cram it all into 1 year and they call it good. And some people take it and they spread it out over 2 years. Some people start in eighth grade and they make it work for eighth and ninth grade. However works for you is fine, but it's really, really solid. And if you were to use that, I think you could feel pretty confident that she's got grammar pretty locked away. Her writing is going to be really solid if you have used that and you feel like her output is matching the rubrics that they provide and things like that. And it's the price just went up, but I think it's like $30 for the whole thing. It's an online curriculum, so you have to print it out, but I love anything that's really good and affordable. That's my jam.
And does Hearth and Story, is that only for older kids? Because my oldest two are solid readers. I mean, they're reading adult fantasy novels, like they're reading
Mhm.
like Tolkien. But it's my third grader who I'm a little bit more like, oh, where are we at with your reading? So do they have younger age also, or is there a different one you would recommend for a younger kid for ELA? Kind
Yeah,
of
they do.
diverging here.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. So they do actually go down to third grade. They've just put
Okay,
out
cool.
their third grade stuff. I would personally, I'm a really big proponent of phonics. So I would just go back and double check that she's feeling pretty solid on phonics before you dive into Hearth and Story. It's going to be a
Mhm.
little bit more advanced than really following up on the full phonics stuff. But yeah, Hearth and Story, I truly think it's great. I want to say maybe it's their fourth grade level of poetry that does like art and poetry, and you look at famous paintings and poetry and how they go together. It makes it really fun for kids. It it's solid. So yeah, you can absolutely, and they have this section called Brain Food that teaches logical fallacies as well as study skills, all kinds of great things. So it will work for all of your kiddos. It is not one that I would use the same level for multiple kids very often.
Mhm.
It's pretty well differentiated. There's some other things we'll talk about later in the episode where, like, yeah, you could totally use that with multiple kids at once. Hearth and Story would be much more kiddo specific for the most part.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. Yeah, because it's interesting with like again, not knowing what my kids know and figuring out what they know. With my third grader and reading, what will happen is she gets about like halfway through a word and then she makes up the rest.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I don't know like what, and we've moved a couple times. So I'm like, maybe it was just a jolt from one school to another that they were working on this and then they switched to the anyway. That's probably what it was. But it's just been fascinating because I've done exactly what you're saying, like go back to phonics. And I'm like, can you sound out a word? And sometimes it's yes and sometimes it's no. And I'm like, oh, an OU makes an ow sound. And it's just been fascinating. Like I'm just like the whole homeschooling journey has been fascinating because again, I just had no idea what my kids even knew. It's been really cool. So that's awesome. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. I'm definitely going to look at their curriculum for sure.
Yeah. And it's the thing, we've done entire podcasts on it, so I won't go on too much, but public schools, brick and mortar schools, they are really not great at a solid phonics foundation. Not because they don't want to, but because it's new. It was the old thing, and then it swung the other way, and they were doing much more three cueing, and then they swung back towards phonics. But a lot of teachers were trained in the cueing methodology, which means that they're combining phonics and cueing, which sometimes leads to situations like you're talking about with your kiddo, where she can sound some of it out and then she relies on these cueing techniques, which don't always help once they get to these bigger, more complicated words. So, one thing that
Yeah,
you
I didn't
might
even know that was
do,
a thing.
yeah. So, one thing you might do is look at All About Reading online. They have placement tests for every level of their curriculum. And it's a free, easy way to check and see where she falls. And if she does pretty well on even the top level, the like level 3 placement test, then I wouldn't worry about going back to something like all about reading. I wouldn't focus there, but it would give you some good insight into where exactly she is on the phonics and if that's something you need to back up and do a little bit more of, or if she just needs more practice.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Did you just finish that whole thing without talking about Hooked on Phonics? Because you love talking about Hooked on Phonics. Are you okay, Amanda?
I remember Hooked on Phonics when I was a kid. 1-800-ABCDEFG.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is still
called it.
around. Yeah, it is. It is still around. And
didn't
I
know
think
that.
it's a great program. And if you need something for your 6-year-old, I will throw it out there. But we weren't talking about it. So I was going to not talk about Hooked on Phonics because we were talking about older kiddos. Yeah, look at that. Look at that
I was
restraint.
like, as soon as Devin said something about like reading and you said, oh, I would go into phonics, I was like, oh, we're ending up on Hooked on Phonics here. There's no way we're finishing this conversation without Hooked on Phonics. And then I'm like, are you an Amanda imposter? I don't know what's happening. Okay. So I will say, as far as coaching sessions go, 2 things. Typically in a coaching session, we bounce around a little bit more than we are right now. Amanda and I kind of structured our notes like, here's Devin's first goal. Like, what are your thoughts? Here's my thoughts, right? In a coaching session, we jive a little bit more organically, but because we're recording and people have to follow this, like it just seemed to make a little bit more sense to organize ourselves a little bit differently. So that's one thing that's like slightly different, I would say, in this coaching session versus an offline one. The other thing is Amanda mentioned, I won't throw all these resources at you kind of thing. My role typically in a coaching session is I open up an email to the person and just dump stuff in there. It's not pretty, but you'll get it afterwards, right? So you'll get like, this is the thing Amanda mentioned. This is the thing and it'll have all the links and all the details there so that you don't have to try to take in what we're talking about and write notes and pull up links and all that kind of stuff. Because a lot of times people put stuff in the chat on Zoom. That's how we meet. And then as soon as you're done, it's gone. So you lose stuff. So anyway, typically that's part of the process, but I took your goal as far as, thinking about 8th grade and then the future, right? High school and all the things that come later in a slightly different direction, which is what Amanda and I do. She's got one way of approaching homeschooling and I have another one. And that's part of the fun of meeting with the two of us is we're both going to answer the question completely differently. So I kind of went a different direction. So my first thought was, you had mentioned holes, making sure she has what she needs, that there's no holes, all that kind of stuff. So without going into too much of the specifics of your family, you have mentioned that you've moved a few times. We've been in that situation as well. So I won't go into the whole thing, but I will say, I think maybe there's a chance based upon our conversations that we've had before that your kiddos might not necessarily graduate in the state that you're currently living in. And so it makes it a little tough sometimes where you're thinking, okay, well, I could look at graduation requirements and work backwards from that. That's what I would typically say. So, I mean, if she has a state that kind of feels like home or where like a ton of your family are, where you think, oh, she might go there to study or something like that, I would take a look at those graduation requirements just to kind of see what's there. Some states do not have graduation requirements for homeschoolers, which is interesting. Other states do. Sometimes they're different than the public school system. So it's state by state. But I feel like if you have thoughts, concerns about there being gaps, that's just a great way to be like, okay, this entire circle needs to be filled in at the end. All these puzzle pieces need to be filled into this circle by the end. And so if I can see it and start placing those puzzle pieces in by the end, I'll know I have all my pieces. A side note to say, even kids who graduate from the public school don't have all their pieces. Okay. They maybe went to all the classes. It's on their transcripts, but they don't know all those things. They're not comfortable with all those things. So don't stress about it too much. The other thing is, as she gets a little bit older and you work a little bit closer to college, is if that's her plan. Sorry, I made an assumption there. If that's her plan.
That's probably the plan. So pretty
okay.
safe assumption. Like that's kind of the vibe we're planning for it, So
there
yeah, safe assumption there.
Yeah. So if that's the case, you can start looking at the schools that she might be interested in eventually as well. If she's still going strong with physics, or maybe you go on some epic field trip or road trip and she just discovers like, this is the thing I want to do with my life. Like you go to Kitty Hawk in North Carolina where the Wright brothers flew the plane and she's like, I've discovered what I'm doing with my life. This is it. And you're like, okay, now I have something I can work backwards from. As she gets older, if you kind of have that, you can look at schools that are strong with that. And Amanda and I did a whole thing once where we looked at schools and their admission requirements for homeschoolers that you could go online and put like Stanford homeschooling admission requirements, and you would be taken to a page that had specific requirements for homeschoolers and how to go about your process, since it would be a little bit different maybe than the other process. So as she gets a little bit older, you can kind of start looking at that stuff. Because for me, I've always been a big, like, what is the finish line? What is the goal? What am I hoping to accomplish in the really, really big sense? And then if I know what that is, I can task orient myself to the finish line. I can break it down into smaller things and make sure that all the pieces line up. So that for me is really helpful in feeling comfortable knowing that we're not going to get to the end and be like, totally forgot to teach you algebra. How did that happen? So that's
Well,
one
I
thing.
like that idea. I hadn't thought about looking. I didn't realize I could look on a college's website and see homeschool requirements. I just
Yeah.
kind of assumed you take the ACT, you have like the, whatever. But well, and my education was so weird too, because I don't know if you guys knew this. I graduated from high school at an international school. And so it was totally different from a typical public school. So I had no idea thinking about looking at colleges and what they require. So I love that idea. I love that idea so much.
Way back in season 1, we did a whole book club series on transcripts and portfolios. And it was in there where we started really looking into like, what specifically are these schools looking for from us? What do we need to prepare? What do we need to have ready? So it's in there. If you or anybody else who's listening is interested, it was a whole section on transcripts and portfolios. You can go check that out. So yeah, I also had a note about Khan Academy. We love Khan Academy. Great resource. OutSchool, of course. OutSchool is amazing. There were some classes that my youngest took, so your kiddo would be too old for them probably now, but there was an organization on there called, oh goodness, what was it? I forget, but basically he took all these physics classes, right? He learned the periodic table, he learned states of matter, he learned all this stuff when he was younger. So there's some really cool stuff that's on there that you could do. You might also be able to look for a co-op that offers high school science as she gets a little older, because lab sciences, we've talked about this, lab sciences are really hard to do as a homeschooler because you're not going to go out and buy a Bunsen burner and set it up in your kitchen. Most likely. Some people probably do.
I don't know. My husband would really love to do that. We might. I'll tell you if we do. I'll send you a picture.
Please do. That would be so awesome.
I would genuinely not be surprised if that is our journey a couple of years from now.
Yeah. But you live in a state currently that has one of the highest rated public school systems in the country. And you're also in an area where I don't think you're as influenced by faux science as some of the other parts of the country are. You could probably find a really solid academic science-based group that is getting together for chemistry and whatever else, so that if you're going to have to buy a gallon of whatever this chemical is, everybody isn't having to buy a gallon of it. You can buy it and everybody meets at the library and you do the experiment with the 1 gallon and split it apart, so that probably exists in your world. As you go forward, I'm a huge proponent of knowing like all the way down what the road is, right? I was just having a conversation tonight with my husband about something that I'm worrying about that's like such a next year thing. And my husband is like, that's far away. Stop. And I'm like, yeah, but no, I can't. I need to know the full road ahead and what it's going to look like. So as you get further ahead, you've got things like AP homeschoolers. I know they offer AP physics. So your kiddo can get some APs in later if they want to. And then of course you've got dual enrollment as they get stronger with some of that stuff too. So it all exists. So there will be no holes. There's so many resources for all that stuff. And you don't have to learn physics in order for your kiddo to be strong with it either, unless you want to, in which case have the best time ever.
No, I think we will find all of the resources for physics and math
and whatever else is out there.
I can do English, but the other things we're good.
Exactly. And then I would say just be open to her shifting gears. I mean, she loves it and that's awesome, but I'm 44 and I've changed my mind on what I want to do with my life 100 times. So she may totally change her mind and that's cool too. And then the last piece of advice that I will always offer is, especially for new homeschoolers, is just to be careful not to kill the thing they love by making it arduous and painful and workified completely. There's so much of a habit to do that where it was like, I need to count the thing you enjoy as school. And so we're going to take it up a notch. And then you've killed the entire thing. So for you or for anyone else who needs to hear that.
Well, and I think that's such a good thing to remember too, because sometimes like there's days where we're not doing anything, it feels like. And I'm just like, well, this didn't feel like school to them. So was it really? And did I need to be harder on this? Am I keeping the bar too low or whatever? So I like that reminder to that it's okay for learning to be fun. It's okay for learning to be easy and calm. It doesn't have to be intense and arduous. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to homeschool. So I think that's
Yeah.
really good advice, not to workify it just for the sake of making it harder.
Yeah. We just did an episode called What Counts as Homeschooling. According to our Spotify Wrapped, it was actually our top episode of 2025. It doesn't have to be hard. Like you said, it doesn't have to be sitting down at a table. It doesn't have to involve a pencil. It doesn't have to involve a textbook. There's so many things that count as school that don't look like school traditionally does, but they still very much count as learning and growth and enrichment. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so next up, you had mentioned I'm struggling with history because I myself am not a history buff. And where do I even start with history? We've been working on geography because that feels like a natural starting point, learning about different countries and how they are similar and different to each other. All right, so we're probably going to have some similar thoughts on this one, and we're going to have some different thoughts because one of us is a history buff and one of us very much is not. So, history buff, take it away.
okay. So first of all, you don't need to be a history buff because you can learn history together, which is so me. Amanda's like, forget that. I'm going to sign the kid up for a class. But I'm like, oh no, we can explore it together and it'll be super fun.
And Amanda's like, I'm going to sit in the back and read something completely different because I'm good. But go on. It's okay. Go on with your bad stuff.
I feel like I'm right in between the two of you because I'm like, oh, learning history would be fun. I'm like, but I could just do something else.
Yeah. The number of texts that I send Amanda in a week that are, here's for your kiddo, because her kiddo loves history. And we both have different themes in history or genres in history that we enjoy too. And so just today I was like, oh, there's this podcast episode. I'm totally going to listen to it, but I think you would love it. I mean, it's multiple times a week. On the podcast, we call Amanda's kiddo Winston. He has a nom de plume for the podcast, but I'm like, for Winston, for Winston, for Winston. Which the fact that his nom de plume is after Winston freaking Churchill should tell you that the kid is like, maybe my kid, I don't know, like switched at birth or something. I'm not sure, but yeah.
the wrong color to be switched at birth. So at least we know that that didn't actually happen. But yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so I will say this. Some of the beauty of doing history alongside your kids. Number one, so much of what we learned in school was inaccurate. So you'd be relearning history anyway. Like even if you had learned history the first time and loved it and absorbed it and retained it all, when you did it with your kids and you use solid resources, you'd be like, this isn't what I learned. And you'd have to relearn it anyway, because we got such the fake version. And
my school was so weird though, Megan, because you got to remember, I was in Spain in 4th grade. So all my friends were learning Idaho history and I'm learning about the Moors in 200 BC. Before that, I was like, there's a BC, like there's a thing before. So that's part of my problem is I'm like, my history is all over the place because I went from school to country to school and I'm just like, I don't even know. Like, is the world round? I don't know anymore. Is it flat? Do I live on Mars? Like, where am I? So I think that's a big part of it is like, I totally agree with you. A lot of the history we learned as kids was incomplete or it was just completely wrong. I don't want my kid to feel like I learned the wrong history the way I feel like. You see all the pressure on my shoulders.
Yeah.
Stressing me out.
Finding history resources is quite the project. So the other thing that I think, and I don't know about your education when you were in international school, but most Americans, the way we learned history was so mind-numbingly boring that I think there's so many adults out there who go to homeschool and they're like, I can't stand history or I don't want to teach history. And I'm like, but it doesn't have to be that way. It could be totally and completely amazing. It's just, that's not how we learned it. I mean, the number of flashcards I had to memorize dates and locations of battles for the American Revolution. It's like, whoa. By the way, we're recording this on the anniversary of the Tea Party, the Boston Tea Party. Was that a big deal? You're up in that neck of the woods, Devin. Boston, was it like a whole big to-do?
I don't know.
You missed it. Okay.
I missed it. That's the other thing is like, I'm in New England with all of the history. And like, anytime I talk to a history person, they're like, did you go see this? I was like, and they're like, well, why not? I was like, it was 200 years ago, 700 years ago. I don't know when it was, but I don't know. You see my history things happening here, Megan.
Well, and learning on site is like the best. Amanda's like, no, it's not. This is so stupid. Love it, right? I've been like went to the Liberty Bell once with a friend from high school. We did selfies in front of the Liberty Bell and I was like, it's a Philadelphia. We had the best time ever. We've been to like Little Bighorn Battlefield. We've been to the Normandy beaches. I mean, you name it, we will go. And I feel like that's such a different way than the way we learned history. It's hard to think of it as learning history when you're just standing there with this awesome tour guide who's just making it amazing and fun and alive. So Amanda's not buying any of what I'm saying.
I'm just sitting here thinking, like, I've taken my dad to a lot of places when he's come to visit me. And now I take my dad and my son to a lot of places and they like geek out together. And I just sit on the bench in the back of the room until they're ready to move to the next room. And then I get up and I move to the next room and they read all the things and they geek out together. So if you're not big on being there and enriched in the local, that's okay. It's okay.
It's also good to hear because, yeah, I feel kind of bad. I'm like, shouldn't I really want to go and see these things? I'm like, eh.
That's me exactly.
Sorry, Megan, I broke your heart. Amanda gets it.
Okay. The other thing that I will say is I am a believer, and this will probably kill Amanda, but I am a believer in the fact that you don't have to learn history in a linear fashion. I get some things like math is very building blocks and puzzles, right? It makes sense for those pieces, those foundational layers. And to some extent, I get history too, because so much of what happens in history is impacted by other things because history repeats itself, as we all know. But to me, that's just rabbit hole fun. So if I'm just like randomly in the Vietnam War and there's a reference to something that happened before that affected the Vietnam War, oh, I'm just going to go figure that out now. Like it didn't matter to me that I haven't already studied that thing that happened before. So I'm a huge fan of project-based learning for history. We put out units that are packed with history because one of us really likes to create history ones. And Amanda's like, we cannot put out another unit study about World War II. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she's killing my fun. But
I'm always like, we just need to break it up. There have been 2 or 3 kind of in a row. So we just need to break it up with something, okay?
I forget what I wanted to do in May. I totally forget, but I sent Amanda like a whole list of ideas. And she was like, no, blah, blah, blah. Like we just did something where I go, okay, fine. But that's only because next month is D-Day. I'm like, so I'll give it to you, but I'm already claiming June for D-Day. Like it's done. So, so we have a lot of project-based learning stuff, but other people do too, right? But we've got stuff. I mean, you have 4 girls, right? We have a whole thing about women in medicine, women in science, and that you could totally do that would be history. And you'd also have science and culture and politics and all sorts of stuff mixed in there. You can totally do that kind of stuff. We just put out a unit study. The basic concept was like women couldn't do what until when, like come again now. And it was all the ridiculous milestones. Like women couldn't drive, women couldn't vote, women couldn't inherit property, women couldn't do this and stuff that women still can't do because it's a global unit study. So it depends on where you are. So project-based learning is super fun for that stuff. I love that stuff. Huge on travel, as I know you are too. So stamp that passport, go see the world, stand in the place history took place. If you can do so, amazing. And if you can't, do it in your backyard whenever possible. I'm a huge fan of documentaries. Tyler Perry makes these amazing movies about Black history in America. And I get like a little hostile sometimes that like Tyler Perry teaches me more history than I got in how many years of education? 16 years of education. And I'm like, why is this Tyler Perry's job? I'm glad he's doing it, but seriously. So there's so many good movies out there. I mean, you take Hidden Figures and it becomes your Friday night movie. And then over the next couple of days, there's going to be comments and questions about like, well, what happened when this happened? Or how would they have handled this? And that's history. That's all your rabbit hole history there, which is good. And then historical fiction books, as long as they're good quality historical fiction books, I have a huge thing about the ethics of historical fiction books and where the line is in it becoming dangerous in the way that you're retelling history in a way that minimizes negative impacts and things like that. We just put something out. What unit study was that, Amanda, that we talked about the boy in the striped pajamas? Oh, it was the one about how democracies fall. And we put a whole thing in there. Like people love to use the boy in the striped pajamas. And it's like, the world's lousiest book written about that time frame. Like, it's so inaccurate. It's got such a dangerous narrative. So that's not a great example, but like good quality examples, like Jennifer Nielsen talking about the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising and stuff. I mean, those books are like super well researched and they're super historically accurate. So, you know, you could even have that in the car when you're taking the kids to soccer or gymnastics or whatever. You have an audiobook going and I'm like, that's history. So yeah, love history. Love, love, love it.
Megan, I think I'm just gonna send my daughter to your house. Okay. You deal with it. You take care of it.
Do I need to start sending you all my history? Like, here's an article for your child. Here's a video for your kid. I'll start like with Winston.
You might need to. She started where we started was World War II because we went down to DC. That was where we started our homeschool journey. Was we went to DC and we went to the World War II memorial. Oh, you would have died. It was so cool because there was a whole group of vets that were there, and there were 3 World War II veterans that were there, and one of them was Rosie the Riveter and her husband, and then another one, and it was really cool. So we got to talk to them, and so then we came back, and she's read Number the Stars. I'm sure you're familiar with that one.
Lois Lowry.
Yes, I love that one. And now I'm trying to get her to read Diary of Anne Frank, but she's like, don't know. This is a little different, like written like a diary. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
If she's she's enjoying World War II genre, Jennifer A. Nielsen, 100%. She's got Resistance. She's got Rescue. She's got another one that starts with an R that we just read not that long ago that's about. So Resistance is the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. The other one that starts with an R, that's her kind of one of her newer ones, is the Warsaw Uprising at the start and end of World War II. The other thing too, she's going into 8th grade. I have a historical fiction book club. You can send her to me. We do next semester. Oh my gosh, we're reading The Lions of Tehran. We're going to be in Iran. We're going to be in the former Yugoslavia. We're going to be in Vietnam. We go into all these different geographic locations in the historical periods and read these books. And then we do the rabbit hole thing where the book will mention such and such an event or a person or a date. And it's like, well, who is that person? And what are they referring to here? And so in class, we talk about not only the text, but then we dig deeper and we have a really good time. So if you don't want to teach history, which I totally get, like not really, but I do kind of get it. I don't judge. You can send them to people who do love teaching history. So
that's true. That's true. That's kind of because I want to, I'm so torn. I kind of want to learn history, kind of want to go down that, but then I'm also kind of like, both options are available.
Amanda's going to give you the other side of that coin now, I think.
Yeah. So like I said, I'm with you for the most part. I generally find history fairly tedious. I do like learning about all of the things that I didn't learn, right? I like learning the more realistic version of history, the less whitewashed version. That said, I don't want to know all of the random facts about history that my kiddo knows. So we definitely work to find that balance. I think geography and travel are really a great place to start. If anyone is listening to the podcast, we do a lot of that in our family as well. If you can't travel as much, we really enjoyed watching The Reluctant Traveler, and we let that drive some of our studies and some of our different discussions about things. Geography Now is a pretty good YouTube channel that covers loads of interesting things. So anytime you have come across a country or you're talking about something, you'd be like, oh, well, let's go see what Geography Now has to say about it. I think something that can be really fun is planning trips, even if you don't actually go on them, to have your kiddos do the trip planning. They're going to learn about the geography, the history, some of the geopolitical issues when they find that this country they want to go to maybe isn't actually a great place to go right now because of something that's going on or whatever. It's a really natural, organic way to learn a lot about places, plus all of the life skills of planning and budgeting for a trip and things like that. And so there are different ways that you could differentiate that between your kiddos, and it might be a little easier for the younger one, and the older one might be doing the full budgeting and looking up airfare and things like that. You can make that into an entire lesson, and that is history and social studies.
Can I just share that one of my favorite Facebook memories that comes up year after year is in 2017, we were planning our 2018 road trip. And I sit down with the kids and we start with a whiteboard, and you can throw whatever you want to on the whiteboard kind of situation. And so the concept was we were going to Montana. That was the thing, but it was like, okay, whatever else you want to add to that. If you want to go to Vegas, you want to go to the Grand Canyon, like toss stuff on there. My youngest was really little still at the time, and he was like, I want to go to the Dead Sea and try to float a bowling ball in the Dead Sea. And I was like, we're going to Montana. Like, I can't. Okay. And then later we continue. And then he wanted to go to the Eiffel Tower. And I was like, well, again, like kind of, and I'm a gentle parent. So it was like, well, the Eiffel Tower isn't really where we're going. And I showed him on a map and the whole thing. And finally he got to the point where he kind of stormed off and went, no one likes my ideas. And it's been a joke for like 8 years now. We're like, is that anywhere near the Dead Sea? And he's like, I still haven't gotten to see if I can float a bowling ball in the Dead Sea yet, but someday. But yeah, travel planning with kids is fun.
I like that idea. Even if you don't take the trip or can't take it yet, I love that idea. Just planning it. That's really fun.
Yeah. Okay. And so I am a big proponent of actually doing proper history education at home. I do generally prefer a mix of more decolonized informational texts and videos, along with interesting books and novels, both fiction and nonfiction, obviously focusing on own voices when possible. We've had a lot of the Nielsen books. There's the other guy,
Alan Gratz. Yeah. Love his
Gratz.
books. So good.
Yeah. Similar genre kind of. And so your kiddos would probably enjoy those as well. They're a good way to get kids interested. If you have a kiddo who's really not into history and they're not even going to read the more fun historical fiction type books, a great introduction is the Nathan Hale's Hazardous Tales books. They're a graphic novel type history, accurate, but very engaging and fun. And yeah, it's a great introduction for kids who are just like, "Nah." A lot of times they'll be interested in that version. For me, I generally recommend really starting actual history learning around mid second grade or third grade. I don't usually recommend it before that because your kiddo, first off, they're not going to remember. Second off, the thing with history is history, like science, really has kind of limited things that they generally cover in school. So whatever they learn in elementary school, they're going to repeat again in middle school with a little bit more depth, and then they're going to repeat it again in high school with even more depth. So there's no need to hammer in kindergarten and first grade when you're just going to have to do it again in third and fourth grade, and then you're going to have to do it again in fifth and sixth grade, and then you're going to have to, enjoy it, right? And make it work for you. For younger kiddos, generally speaking, I really like History Quest. History Quest and Curiosity Chronicles are both great for elementary aged kiddos because they're pretty decolonized. They have a nice mix of things. In my experience, kids almost always have a really strong preference between one or the other. And you, as the parent, cannot guess which one they're going to prefer. That if I've learned anything from working with homeschooling parents, it's a total coin toss on which one they'll like. But the good news is both of them have a free trial kind of thing. So you can go to their website, download it, and run it by your kiddo to see which one they're like, yeah, this one. Like, no, definitely not that one. And they both offer audiobook options. So it can be more of a fun story based. And then you can dive into additional videos or map work with Google Maps or novels. They don't include a lot of novels like we were talking about. I mostly supplemented myself with those, but they will occasionally recommend those as well. Then for like middle school, unfortunately, I personally do not recommend the curriculum that comes after History Quest. It uses some textbooks and things that I'm not a big fan of. We're currently using one as a bit of a bridge, and I'm spending an obscene amount of time supplementing with own voice texts and novels and books. And it's great, but it's a lot of work. So if you're looking for something else that's set that you can kind of pull out and do, and then you can go off with unit study things and interesting things like that, I think that generally speaking, big world history from Mint and Bloom is a great option because it is kind of all of world history, right? From a long, long time ago up until modern age. And it covers things, it's a unit study, kind of linear unit study fashion. So you'll have book recommendations, podcast recommendations, video recommendations. That is one that you could do with multiple ages. They do specifically have an elementary version and then a middle school, high school version. You can differentiate it yourself however you wanted. If you bought both versions, you could pretty easily do it with the kiddos and then just keep it and kind of reuse it as they get older. But that's a good option, I think, for families who have a lot of kiddos that they want to be able to do the same sorts of things and just be able to differentiate it a little deeper with the older kiddos. And then again, if that style just doesn't work for you or your kiddos, or you find that like one of your kiddos is like, I do not like this unit study based nonsense, like give it to me this way. We have other recommendations. A lot of times unit studies work really well for history. We've talked about that before. That's why we put them out, not just because Megan's a history buff, but they work really well, but not for everyone. And unfortunately, the more kids you have, the more likely you are to have one of them in the mix that's like, I don't like this style. I want something different. And so if you find that is the case, we can always circle back and come up with some other ideas for you.
There's always one. There's always one.
That's it.
Oh, yes.
I have an only, but we were foster parents for many years. And if I learned anything from that experience, it's that while there are 100% similarities with every baby, they're all their own unique, interesting little character as well.
It's very true. Oh, it's so true. Yeah. With 4 girls, I see it. They're all each have their own things.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. All right. So we have one last goal, which I'm excited about this one. I'm excited about all of them, but I really like this one. But I will say, we did say we really are terrible at ending coaching sessions on time. So we usually try to keep our podcast episodes to about an hour. And sometimes if we go over, it's kind of like, well, what should we cut and whatever. But this one will probably just be longer than an hour. So if you need to pause and come back to us, come back to us. But yeah, we'll get there. But last but not least, your third goal here said, it also feels like I don't have a good structure for homeschooling. I am somewhere in between unschooling and curriculum. I am personally not a very structured person with my schedule, but I want to be better about it. My daughters all thrive with a schedule, so I need to figure this one out. So I'm pretty sure we're going to be different here in this response. So take it away, Amanda. And then I'm going to end with some trust the process, make a vision board stuff, and it'll be great.
On point. Totally on brand. Okay, so I just want to start with saying I totally feel this. My kiddo definitely needed more structure from me than I had planned to provide when we first started. So I feel it. I'll just leave it at that. Commiseration sometimes helps more than anything else. I will say that I think as well, whether your child needs structure or not, how you set up learning in your home is a really great opportunity to help your child work on executive functioning skills that will be super important to them as an adult. So whatever you choose to do, scaffold, 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 and we'll talk a little bit about what that means. So for you, it might mean that if you choose to work together to create maybe a daily to-do list, and then you work together to make sure that it gets marked off each thing and you've finished the tasks at the end of the day. Or maybe you're sitting down with them and helping them plan out a big project with, using a calendar and looking, we're going to work out from here and this is what it looks like. Or maybe you have a deadline and you're working back from the deadline of this is how we're going to plan it. And so you're going to be doing this with them the first couple of times. And then each time after you pull back, just a little and have them work on it a little bit more. They're taking the lead with that. To me, that's one of those things, right? I don't know any adult that doesn't have to do some version of that, whether they're working for themselves or they're working somewhere else. You have to have a to-do list that you finish. You have to know how to plan out a project. And so helping kids learn that, absolutely, you can start in elementary school, working together, showing them how you're thinking about their day and how you're planning their day, getting their input, and then slowly transitioning by middle school so that they're making a lot of those decisions on their own and you're supporting it. With the goal of by high school, maybe they're doing it on their own and you're just touching base with them and seeing where they need help or support. So yeah, big fan of doing that, whatever that might look like. And that can also be things like helping them set time limits. That was something we found in my home. My kiddo really needed structure around, like, you're going to spend this much time on math. And if you haven't finished a unit in that amount of time, you're going to stop. Because if you work past this amount of time, I have found that you just get more and more frustrated and you're not really learning anymore because you're frustrated instead of learning. So we had to start with me kind of helping create those boundaries and then teaching him how to use timers. And even still, he's in middle school and sometimes I have to be like, hey, where's your timer? I feel like maybe we need to find that, get that back out. That probably needs to be dusted off and used again. Like, feeling like you're getting a little frustrated with things. So just helping reinforce those things and those ideas. You have probably noticed this yourself at this age, but in puberty and the late tween, early teen years, kiddos oftentimes have a pretty big regression in their executive functioning skills as their brains get completely washed in hormones, and you have to kind of go back to the basics and dig deep for
Very reassuring to
patience.
hear you say that, because yes.
Yeah, but like, we've had this. Like, this has been a solid skill for years. Like, how are we back to this point? Like, it's normal. So don't be alarmed if you're finding that you're needing to do some of that. Again, just back to the basics of scaffold, scaffold, scaffold.
Well, and I like the idea of making a to-do list together with them, because one of the hardest parts of structure is, and like I've told my husband this, I'm like, it's all on me to make sure that everything is done, but if I put it on my kids too, like you said, that kind of helps them with that executive function and learning how to set goals and see it through. So I really like that idea of doing a to-do list with them for the next day or the next week or whatever it might be. I think that's a really cool idea.
All right. I like what you said, because as I said at the beginning, I didn't see your notes ahead of time. I might not be all that much different, with the exception of my opening statement, which is that some kids truly thrive on structure. True story. Other times, kids kind of crave structure because it's what they've known their whole life, especially if they went to preschool and then they went into elementary school, middle school, right? I mean, when they go into preschool, it's like you come in, coat on hook, wash hands, cubby backpack, name tag on the board. They're programmed from the time they're really little to follow these sequence steps that every day is the same. And this is what I do and all of that. And I was talking to somebody not that long ago, I think it was in a coaching session, whose kiddo had a really, really rough day at school because it was just after daylight savings time and the clock hadn't been changed. And they were like, this is not what we do at 10 a.m., but it wasn't 10 a.m. They've been in that world where everything has been micromanaged and controlled for so long that sometimes there's a bit of a freak out when that structure doesn't exist. And then they all of a sudden have this freedom that they don't know what to do with. And it's like, right? So for me, we did a whole episode at one point on structure in homeschooling, rethinking structure in homeschooling. And it wasn't to say all structure is bad. Get rid of all the structure, because we definitely have some structure in our household as well. But for me, part of it was that is a kind of a core elemental block of the public school system, is that structure. And so when we take our kids out of the public school system and decide, hey, we're going to do this differently, we're going to do that differently, we're going to do this differently, so many people are like, but how do I do that with structure? And I'm like, yeah, but structure is also part of the system that you're trying to dismantle. A lot of times people just don't necessarily realize it. It's like bells to start and stop things and all that kind of stuff. So when we did that episode of structure, one of the things we looked at were monochronic and polychronic cultures, which should be super interesting for you, Devin, if you grew up in Spain, which is a polychronic culture, right? And then, but you're an American, which is monochronic. And so part of that is, in Spain, it's very natural to go with the flow on time and to not worry about it and to let your kids fall asleep in a pram at a restaurant because who cares, right? And in the US, it's like the children go to bed at 8 o'clock, so we have to be home by 7:22 at the absolute latest, or else the whole schedule will fall apart. So
Are you watching My House, Megan, right now? I mean,
so we kind of looked at that. And again, not to say get rid of all structure, but it was a kind of a thing to say, okay, let's remove some of it and then see what serves to be put back in. What serves your family well versus what are we clinging to because it's what we've always had and what we've always known. Are there benefits of structure that would be helpful to break down and to remove, and then elements of structure to keep? And you can find where your happy spot is by doing that. Possibly, if it serves you, whatever. Not my household, just my thought. So for us, we're very rhythm people and culture people. So we're very much about most Tuesdays look the same or most Wednesdays look the same. And a lot of that is dictated by classes that they take online. On Tuesday, Liam has chess, and on Friday, Liam has Portuguese. And so every Friday is the same. Every Tuesday is the same kind of thing. But it's not a matter of like, we always do the same things all the time, every day. So we do have some flow and some predictability without there being what I would call structure, because we definitely fly by the seat of our pants more than anybody who calls it structure would allow in their home. So some of the things like what Amanda was talking about, like a to-do list, like my oldest kiddo is taking a math class online because he has his eye on a class through Arizona State University, but it had a prereq, and he was like, I think I'm okay with that prereq, but I'm not positive. So I just want to blow through the prereq real quick to make sure I'm good for the Arizona State class. Okay, fine. So every Sunday night, he and I sit down and just break down the work because it's an asynchronous class. So we sit down and we're like, okay, like, what do you have this week? And it's like, oh, Thursday and Friday are pretty busy. You should front load this week and get a lot of stuff done Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, if your goal is to get this done this week or that done, whatever the unit is. So that's our system. My daughter, on the other hand, is a calendar nut. She loves her calendars. She goes onto Google Images. She'll put December 2025 calendar. She prints out an 8.5 by 11, pencils it in. This is going to take me 2 days. This is going to take me an afternoon. And she writes in everything else that she's got going on. And that's her system, to the point that now she just does it on her own. She doesn't even need me. She's like, I need to regroup my life. I'm printing a calendar. Okay, great. Print a calendar. Have the best time ever. She fills it in, and then she feels like she knows what's going on. So each kid, to the point before, might also have differences in the way they like to do these things. But yeah, for anybody who's like, but we need more structure. In my world, it goes with deschooling. So we have a deschooling episode, and then we have a rethinking structure and homeschool episode. They might just be worth a listen at some point, just to kind of see, thoughts. You don't have to take them, but they're out there.
Well, and I like how you said every Tuesday looks the same and every Friday looks the same, because that's kind of us too. I'm very much like, I'm planning a big Christmas party 2 days before I decide to invite people to it, and I'm like, what am I doing? But like, that's how I live my life, but I do, like, with my daughters. And it was interesting because switching to homeschooling, I was super worried because in the summer we have lots more breakdowns and we have lots more stress, and because there isn't that structure. But it's been really interesting now that they don't have that structure at school. I've noticed them have more flexibility in life and stuff. But I do like that idea of it being like, it doesn't necessarily mean every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday has to look the same, but every Monday kind of is generally the same, and every Thursday is kind of generally the same. I like that approach. That helps me a lot because I work, I have the kids, I have the house to deal with, we have the dog, it's like there's so much, and it's unrealistic for every day to look the same for me. Like, it just is,
Mm-hmm. Another episode that might be helpful for anybody in that same situation is we did an episode on why it's good to be bored, and how to get kids to enjoy boredom time and know what to do with boredom time. Because a lot of them who went to school and they were up and it was like, hurry up, eat, brush your teeth, get dressed, have breakfast, get in the car. And then they come home and it's like, you got to do your homework really quick because you have soccer. Or you go, okay, we got to do that. You get home from soccer, shower, dinner's going to be on the table in half an hour. Read your book. If you're not in bed, it's going to be a nightmare waking you up in the morning. And this was their life for so many of these kids who went to public school. And so, yeah, they freak out when there's less structure when they come home because they've never had it before. They don't quite know what to do with it sometimes. So it's a learning curve, and figuring out how to have downtime and knowing how to pick up an interest-led project in your downtime and all of that it's a skill that a lot of them just don't have. So like any other skill, we have to put that scaffolding into place for them to understand what to do with that time sometimes.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and it has been interesting to see them, what they do to fill their time. Like my one taking your cake classes. She literally spent 4 days making a cake. She baked it one day, let it cool, did the crumb coat, did the other coat, then did the decorations. And I was like, how cool is it that it took you 4 days to make this cake, but you stayed with it and everything. So it has been interesting having a looser structure that they're able to fill in those gaps with interests and things that they've been finding. So
yeah,
I guess I probably shouldn't stress so much. I think that's like the beginning mom school life.
Yeah.
You're just stressed. You don't want to mess it up. You want your kids to have the best and you just want to do it right.
Yeah.
But there's no right. I don't like that.
And I think not only is it the new homeschool thing, but then it's the, oh crap, it's middle school time. And holy cow, how is high school starting already? So I think that recurs again and again, just so you know, and you can be prepared for it. Like you'll have just found your rhythm and then it'll be like, oh my gosh, now we have to college tour. Oh gosh. Okay. What are we doing? So it'll
I'm
just
glad
keep
you're
happening.
anticipating the breakdowns.
Yeah. There you go.
We can go ahead and pencil them in. No problem.
That'd be great. I'll be back.
And that's when you book another coaching session.
Well, and I like that because it is true. Like the coaching sessions don't have to just be a one time. You can come back as your kids are in different phases, or because I know my coaching now is so different from what it looked like before I even started. So I think that that's a really good point, is like, just because you don't have to redo a coaching session, but because you choose to do coaching again doesn't mean you've messed up, and it doesn't
Right.
mean you did something wrong. It means that you're in another part and you need that support. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about that even with our unit studies. I mean, we did one a couple of months ago on the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And there's a really small activity for elementary kiddos about voting equality and voting rights. And it's age appropriate and it's easy to understand. But then in the late middle school, early high school level of that same unit study, there's a pretty intense redistricting gerrymandering exercise to truly understand what that term is and why it's in the news and all that kind of stuff. So you're not going to do that with a 7-year-old. You can do the basic one, but then every couple of years you can keep breaking that unit study out and going into the higher level books, into the more mature movies, into the deeper level exercises. And so it's kind of the same concept with coaching. Like every time you come back, you're coming back to it, but at a deeper level than the last one. So it works.
Yeah.
All right. Phew, we did it, right? Again, a little bit longer than our typical episode, but that tracks. Okay. That tracks for a coaching session. That's kind of how we did it. We stink at ending coaching sessions at the 1 hour mark. So we kind of talked about it, but what happens next? I mean, for some people, they're good. They come, they do their coaching session, they get their few answers. I feel like that, especially with transcripts. They're like, oh, now I know how to build a transcript. Thanks. I'm on my way. Great. That's awesome. They come, they get the resources, they get the reassurance, they go off, they happy homeschool just with a little bit more pizzazz than they had an hour and a half ago. So that works for some people and it's great.
Yeah, well, totally. And then some other people, they choose to join our Patreon. We have live meetings almost every week, sometimes twice a week, depending on what we're doing. And they're small. It's a small enough group every week that there's totally time to bring your specific questions and do a bit of a deep dive, some brainstorming with us and with the group. It's really supportive and encouraging. Other people find, like Devin was saying, other people find that they really prefer continued coaching and they want to meet sometimes monthly for a check-in, some fine-tuning and kind of additional support, especially from those people who are definitely going to actually start by reassuring you that you're doing a great job. Sometimes you go for support and the first thing is like, well, are you really sure that this is what you want to do? Like, that is not what, like you did great. You made progress. Let's see what we can do to tweak and have it be an even better month coming up. Like sometimes yeah, we all need that, especially these days. Let's be real. Especially these days, we all need a little bit of like, you're doing.
I sent an email just like that today. It was as if you were over my shoulder while I was working today, because I have a regular coaching client. She sent me an update about something we had talked about them working on. And she's like, here's how it went. And it went well. And I was so excited for them. So yeah, I mean, I have people that I meet with every month, like you said. Sometimes I even meet with kiddos because sometimes hearing things from someone other than your parent, especially as a teenager, suddenly makes the idea so much more appealing. So that's part of what I do.
Yeah. And look, if you are listening to this episode when it drops in December of 2025, we totally understand that things are tight for a lot of people now. So we have discounted our coaching sessions through the end of the year. So through the end of 2025, there's a link in the show notes so you can book a session for 25% off. And just remember, the session does not have to take place right now. or before the end of the year. As long as you book in December, you can book your session into January and still save that 25% off. So the link and the discount code and all that jazz, it'll be in the show notes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And so there we go. A little over, but hopefully it was a good one. And as always, we like to end the episodes with a mantra. So this week's mantra is, your kids' education is worth care, thought, and support. And you don't have to figure it out alone. We can help.
True story. That's what we're here for. Oh, Devin, thank you for joining us today and for being our first ever return guest. It's going to be so
Well, thanks
good. Do you
again
ever
for
see
having
people?
me. It was
Oh,
super helpful to just, it's just helpful to talk about it, just to hear other people's experiences. So thank you guys for all your time. I appreciate it.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
awesome. And I love your homeschooling journey and that your kids are thriving and that you're having fun. It's going to be awesome. And it'll only get better as you settle into your groove a little bit more and all that good kind of stuff. And you know where to find us if you have questions in the future.
For sure. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Happy homeschooling, and we'll catch you next time.
Yeah. Have a great one.